Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're plunging into an absolutely monumental topic, one you specifically asked us to explore, actually. It's the future of generative artificial intelligence and its profound impact on media, creative industries, and maybe even our perception of reality itself. It really feels like a game changer on so many levels, and we've pulled together an incredible stack of sources for this, including some fascinating excerpts from AI, media, and simulated worlds, focusing on this idea of prompting and inhabiting bespoke realities.
Yeah, and our mission really for you today is to unpack how generative AI is fundamentally reconfiguring, well, the entire creative stack. We're talking everything from how films get made, how books are written, games designed, and even, how we might one day actually live inside a digital world. And this goes so far beyond just a tech upgrade, right? It's about new economic models, new power structures emerging, and these really deep questions about what it means to be human in a world that's becoming increasingly, well, synthetic.
Okay, let's dive right in then. The generative revolution, deconstructing the new creative stack. You sent over some really intriguing material on how generative AI is directly challenging that traditional Hollywood studio model. The one built on huge capital, massive teams. The sources are pointing to an unprecedented proliferation of AI video production studios just since 2022. And it's not just a couple here and there. A 2025 FBRC report found at least 65 new AI-centric film studios launched globally since 2022. Over 30 of those popped up in 2024 and early 2025 alone. I mean, what does that staggering rate tell us about where Hollywood might be headed?
Well, what's really fascinating, I think, is this rise of the micro studios. Get this. Nearly 70% of these new AI studios, they operate with teams of 5 people or fewer. 5 people. That radically democratizes production capabilities and empowers what the sources are calling omnigen creators, sort of all-in-one creators. I mean, picture this. One independent filmmaker reported that certain visual effects shots, VFX shots, that used to need a team of 3 working for months could now be done in just a few hours using AI.
Wow, just hours.
Yeah. That's a complete shift in scale, isn't it?
No,
It fundamentally changes who can actually create high-quality content.
and the economic disruption from that must be just as significant. The sources suggest AI is revitalizing the mid-budget film,
Yeah.
that category that was, practically squeezed out by the blockbuster or bust thinking. Now, apparently, a $10 million budget can give you the on-screen look of a $30 million production. And you have studios like Promise saying they want to partner with Hollywood and not replace it, making more diverse stories financially viable because the costs are lower.
Precisely. And this efficiency is getting baked in at every single stage of the production pipeline. So in ideation and scripting, you've got tools like Scriptbook and Vault AI analyzing narratives, even predicting commercial viability. Generative models can draft whole scenes, suggest dialogue, offer plot directions, really helping writers get past that blank page fear. Then in pre-production and VFX, you're seeing GPT-4o, Adobe Firefly used for visual concepts, and crucially, things like rotoscoping, that painstaking frame-by-frame tracing for CGI that can be automated now with up to 90% greater speed. 90%! AI video tools like Sora, Runway, Luma Dream Machine, they're being used for asset creation. Experts are predicting 2K resolution by the end of 2025, which is getting pretty close to suitable for major productions, and even in actual production post-production. AI cameras automating complex tracking shots, AI cutting editing time potentially in half. Director Robert Zemeckis even used Wonder Dynamics for de-aging actors in his film here.
Okay, so if these tools are changing everything, what specific skills suddenly become really critical? And maybe more importantly, what skills become, well, almost obsolete overnight? The sources talk about traditional, siloed roles giving way to more tech-centric structures, new jobs like prompt engineers and AI-integrated art directors. What's that shift look like on the ground?
That is a critical question. It points to a major upheaval in the creative workforce, especially perhaps for VFX artists who are, largely non-unionized. There's a pretty grim prediction in the sources. Those super long credit rolls on blockbusters, listing over 1,000 VFX workers like on Marvel's Deadpool and Wolverine, they're expected to get shorter and shorter as AI just automates more and more of those tasks.
You'd think the big legacy Hollywood studios would be jumping all over this, embracing it completely. But the sources say they're being cautious. Big legal risks involved, especially after those 2023 strikes, the WGA and SAG-AFTRA strikes, where AI was such a huge sticking point. What are they trying to mitigate with moves like, say, Lionsgate's partnership with Runway?
That's a key insight, yeah. You see these strategic moves like Lionsgate partnering with Runway, but specifically to create a customized generative AI model, one trained exclusively on Lionsgate's own clean data, their own intellectual property, It's a critical defensive move, really. It lets them use the tech, leverage their own IP without running afoul of copyright issues or all the legal uncertainty out there.
Okay, so we've talked about this incredible democratization, right? Power shifting to tiny micro studios.
Right.
But then you dig deeper into the sources, and you find what I think is maybe the most jarring insight, the Hollywood paradox. It suggests that while the tools empower the small guys, the fundamental engines driving the AI, they're actually re-centralizing power in ways we haven't seen before. How does that tension play out? What does that mean for the future entertainment?
That's precisely the paradox. The most advanced foundational AI models, the real powerhouses like Sora, Gemini, Runway, they aren't being developed by the film studios themselves. They're coming from a handful of huge tech companies. So the legacy studios, they're not building these things from the ground up. They're becoming clients of big tech, which creates this whole new dependency, right? It suggests the future power brokers in entertainment might actually be tech executives, the ones controlling API access, controlling the development roadmaps for these essential creative tools. So the power struggle isn't just indie creators versus legacy studios anymore. It's this complex three-way dynamic, indie creators, media conglomerates, and these incredibly powerful tech giants.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit, moving from the visual spectacle of film to, say, the world of words. How is AI showing up there? The sources suggest it's not really seen as a replacement for authors, but more like a centaur partner. Human plus AI, augmenting creativity. How's that playing out?
It really is becoming a kind of creative multi-tool for authors. There were survey findings from 2025 showing that 81% of authors who use AI employ it mostly for research. After that, it was marketing materials, outlining plots, that sort of thing. It effectively handles a lot of the drudgery,
Yeah.
freeing authors up for the core storytelling. One author even noted they could probably publish 2 books in the time it previously took to write one. Tools like Originality.ai, Squibbler, they're enabling this.
But what's really striking from the sources, though, is how divided authors seem to be. Almost an even split in 2025. 45% using AI, 48% not. And the main objection for those who don't, it seems rooted in ethical concerns, worries about AI models being trained on copyrighted material without consent or compensation. How does that ethical tension impact, say, the publishing world?
Yeah, that creates a real conflict, even for authors who do use the tools. They're grappling with the practical benefits versus these broader worries about, well, devaluing the profession. Publishers, they're approaching this with extreme caution, is the phrase used. Standard publishing contracts have clauses where the author warrants the manuscript is original work. And under current U.S. copyright law, purely AI-generated content isn't copyrightable. It's considered public domain. The Authors Guild advises disclosing if you use more than a very minimal amount of AI text. Amazon KDP already requires disclosure.
So what does this all mean for you, the reader, or for authors trying to figure this out? The sources point to this pretty significant disclosure divide. Apparently, a striking 74% of authors using AI don't disclose it to readers. They see AI as just another tool, like using a thesaurus or a grammar checker. What are the implications of that for the market?
Well, it strongly suggests a likely bifurcation, a split in the market. You'll probably have one tier of low-cost, high-volume content that's heavily AI-assisted, and then a premium tier of provably human-authored work. In that kind of scenario, the author's value shifts, doesn't it, from just producing text to becoming a guarantor of authenticity. This could give rise to a whole authenticity as a service economy, maybe with human-made watermarking or something similar.
Okay, let's shift our focus again this time to game design. This seems like an area where AI isn't just augmenting, it's really foundational, right? Creating these infinite, dynamic, responsive worlds. It feels less like an improvement and more like a total reimagining.
Oh, absolutely. Modern AI-driven procedural content generation, PCG, it's like traditional methods, but on steroids, as one source put it. It doesn't just follow rules. It learns underlying design principles. So it can generate vast, complex content that's still stylistically coherent. There's an upcoming game mentioned, Resurgence, that uses AI to generate basically unlimited content within its world, makes every single playthrough genuinely unique.
And what feels really transformative here is the change in non-player characters, the NPCs. They used to be like digital puppets, just repeating lines. But now we're seeing dynamic, conversational NPCs that can actually think, remember, interact with startling realism. How is AI making that leap?
Yeah, the LLM-powered NPCs, large language model power, they're a total game changer. Players can have unscripted conversations using natural language in real time, and they get contextually appropriate, fully voiced responses back. These NPCs are being designed with memory, too. They can recall past interactions, develop sort of organic relationships. It creates this persistent social fabric in the game world. Plus, they can have unique personalities, motivations, procedurally generated backstories, values, beliefs that actually drive their decisions and emotions. Tools like in-world AI, convey at AWS for games, they're the engines behind this.
And similar to film, is this also democratizing game development, lowering the barriers for smaller teams by automating some of the grunt work?
Absolutely. AI tools are streamlining asset creation significantly. You have things like Unity's Project Muse generating textures, sprites, animations just from text prompts, Sloyd creating copyright-free 3D models, 11 Labs providing really high-quality AI voice synthesis. It allows indie developers to punch far above their weight, as the saying goes. They can bring these ambitious visions to life without needing huge budgets or massive teams.
But despite all this cool innovation, the sources also highlight real concerns among developers. A 2024 Game Developers Conference survey found 84% of developers worry about the ethical implications of AI in their work. What are their main worries?
The primary concerns seem to be job displacement, firstly, and secondly, those unresolved legal and ethical issues around using copyrighted content for training the AI models.
Hmm.
Interestingly, the apprehension seems highest in roles related to narrative design and quality assurance, QA, which suggests fears that AI could undermine creative integrity in storytelling and also maybe impact established processes like testing and bug finding.
Okay, now let's pivot towards what feels like the ultimate vision here, the kind of sci-fi endpoint. The ability to literally prompt a world and then live in it.
Yeah.
The sources are clear. This isn't about one single invention, but rather a convergence of multiple technologies coming together.
Yeah.
What are those core pieces?
Right. It really demands what the sources call multimodal AI engines, engines that can fuse different senses into these generated worlds. So the latest models, like GPT-4o and Gemini, they process multiple inputs simultaneously: text, images, audio, video. This more holistic understanding lets them interpret prompts like, say, create a stormy, windswept coastal village. Not just visually, but also generating the sounds of roaring wind, getting the architectural style right. It helps reduce those weird hallucinations or inconsistencies you sometimes see.
But for these worlds to feel truly alive, truly reactive, we're going to
Yeah.
need major breakthroughs in real-time rendering and physics simulation, beyond what current games offer, right?
Yeah.
What are the sources saying on that front?
That's exactly right. We're seeing advances in neural rendering, techniques like deep billboards showcased at SIGGRAPH. Essentially, AI learns how a 3D object looks from every possible angle. Then it can almost instantly paint that object onto a 2D screen in high resolution, no matter how the viewer moves. Think about rendering incredibly complex things like individual strands of hair or really dynamic motion with much less computing power than traditional methods. That makes real-time VR feel shockingly realistic. And for physics, there are platforms like Dimension Labs' Simo.ai. They use deep learning to basically infer physics results thousands, even up to 100,000 times faster than traditional simulators. That enables interactive, genuinely realistic physics within these virtual worlds.
There's also the massive synthesis challenge, isn't there? You can generate the world, but actually populating it with high-fidelity content, characters, objects, that's another huge hurdle.
Exactly. Generating realistic, customizable, and animatable 3D human avatars. That's a big one. There's mention of Avatar Forge, which uses an LLM, kind of like an intelligent artist, to interpret prompts and then interact with procedural 3D human generators, allowing for back and forth refinement. Similarly, creating large-scale, coherent 3D environments is incredibly complex. Techniques like 3D generative adversarial networks, GANs, where two AIs basically compete to create better outputs, they show promise. But they face big challenges with needing massive amounts of training data and just sheer computational complexity.
And then there's the interface layer. How do we actually enter these worlds? It feels like we need to move beyond clunky headsets to make it feel seamless. What alternatives are popping up?
Well, holography is one potential alternative to VR headsets, projecting interactive 3D content right into physical space, no headgear needed. The market forecasts for that are pretty substantial, predicted to grow from around $7.14 billion in 2025 to over $32.2 billion by 2034. Big growth. We're also seeing a haptic levolution touch feedback, going way beyond simple vibrations. There was a breakthrough mentioned from Northwestern University: tiny wireless actuators that apply precise force to the skin. They can simulate really nuanced feelings, pressure, stretching, even the difference between silk and corduroy textures. And AI is crucial here, making this feedback intelligent, adaptive, translating visual data like seeing rain in the virtual world into corresponding haptic sensations.
This all seems to be building towards a more intuitive connection, right?
Yeah.
An AI-powered interface layer that translates our intent directly into action within the virtual world. What does that progression look like? Maybe even thought control.
Exactly. We're seeing AI designing AR and VR interfaces that learn from user behavior, track gaze, and adapt the digital content in real time. That's spatial computing adapting to you. Generative AI itself becomes an interface, users literally speaking their world into existence with natural language prompts, just talking to the AI. And then, yes, the ultimate frontier seems to be brain-computer interfaces, BCIs,
Hmm.
where AI interprets neural signals directly, allowing manipulation of virtual content with thoughts, maybe even emotions.
So boiling this down, what does this all mean for you, the listener, and how you might personally experience these worlds in the future? The sources talk about an immersion divide. Can you unpack that concept?
Yeah, the idea is that the convergence of all these technologies, visual, audio, haptic, interface, creates a kind of modular interface stack. Users will be able to assemble their desired level of immersion, presence. That feeling of truly being there stops being a simple yes-no thing and becomes a spectrum. So picture two people in the same virtual world. One might be feeling the rain on their skin via haptics, feeling the texture of stone walls. The other might just be experiencing it as an audiovisual event on a screen. This has really deep implications for equity, for social connection. It could fragment the very definition of what a shared experience even means, potentially creating new kinds of inequality based on who can afford deeper immersion.
Okay, let's zoom out now to the broader systemic shocks. Across the economy, legal systems, culture, the ability to prompt and inhabit these bespoke worlds feels like a truly disruptive force, far beyond just media creation itself.
Oh, absolutely. We're already seeing new business models emerging to try and monetize this potentially infinite personalized content. You've got direct-to-consumer, D2C, personalization, maybe bespoke services, offering custom movies generated from your personal inputs, likely as premium offerings, platform and subscription models like today's streaming services, but hosting vast libraries of AI-generated content, or maybe co-creation platforms giving users access to advanced AI tools. Then there are asset marketplaces, a whole B2B economy for buying, selling, licensing discrete AI-generated assets like scripts or 3D models, and B2B and API services where tech companies offer their generative capabilities as white-labeled services for other businesses to integrate.
But this explosion of content and models also fuels that critical power struggle we touched on earlier.
Yeah.
Centralization versus decentralization. Which way do the sources suggest things are leaning?
It's a real tug of war. On one side, you have the centralized platforms, the big incumbents like Google, Microsoft, Meta. They control the most powerful AI models, the distribution channels. They offer access on and cheaply upfront, but usually in exchange for user data and taking a significant cut of revenue, sometimes 30 to 70%. They act as gatekeepers, essentially. But on the other side, you have challengers emerging. Companies like Sahara AI, Ether. They're trying to build decentralized platforms using Web3 tech like blockchain and tokenization. Their aim is to empower creators more directly, offering things like true IP ownership via NFTs, direct royalty payments, open access to AI tools, and using decentralized compute networks to cut reliance on expensive cloud services from the big guys. It really presents a fundamental choice about what the future of creative work looks like.
And what's particularly wild here is how the very nature of celebrity and influence is also being radically altered. It's not just the content changing, but the faces delivering it, sometimes not even human faces.
Right. We're seeing the rise of virtual influencers. Entirely AI-generated celebrities like Mila Sophia was mentioned, amassing millions of followers, getting real brand partnerships. For brands, the advantages are obvious. 247 availability, perfect message consistency. They can appear in impossible scenarios, and you eliminate long-term human talent costs and complications. But this creates what the sources call an authenticity paradox. They mimic human interaction, but they inherently lack, genuine human touch and emotional depth. Raises questions about long-term trust, the most likely future. The sources seem to suggest that human AI centaur model again, collaboration. AI handles scale, personalization. Human creators provide the vision, the emotional core, the authentic perspective. Maybe human celebrities evolve more into creative directors, guiding these AI-driven experiences rather than just being the face.
Of course, all this innovation comes bundled with a significant legal and ethical quagmire, as the sources put it. Policymakers are really scrambling to catch up. Can you outline the core challenges there?
Oh, it's a huge challenge for society, definitely. First, there's the authorship crisis and copyright law. U.S. copyright law currently requires human authorship, so purely machine-generated works, not copyrightable. They fall into the public domain. That was affirmed in cases like the famous monkey selfie case and Feller v. Perlmutter. Then you have the massive fair use battleground. AI companies train their models on enormous amounts of copyrighted data, claiming it was fair use for research. Creators, publishers, artists, they argue it's mass-scale infringement. That's led to major lawsuits. Getty Images, the New York Times suing OpenAI, for example. A key development mentioned was a May 2025 U.S. Copyright Office report concluding that fair use probably doesn't apply when the AI's output directly competes with the original works it was trained on. That's big. And crucially, there's this liability vacuum. If an AI infringes copyright or defames someone who's legally responsible, the user who prompted it, the developer who built the AI, or
Yeah.
nobody, that ambiguity creates huge risks. And it's worth remembering this varies internationally, too. The US says AI-only work isn't copyrightable. The UK suggests it potentially could be if there was significant human arrangement. China has actually granted copyright in some cases based on the user's intellectual input, so it's messy.
Okay, so given this incredibly complex space, what does this all mean for navigating it responsibly? It seems like we desperately need some frameworks for responsible creation. What are the key recommendations coming out of the sources?
Absolutely. Transparency and labeling are flagged as essential, especially for fighting misinformation and deepfakes. We need reliable detection tech and clear standards for identifying synthetic media. Bias and representation is another huge one. Mandating diverse training data sets, requiring regular bias audits to stop AI from just amplifying harmful stereotypes. And data privacy. Given that these large language models can sometimes inadvertently leak sensitive training data, strong protocols, data anonymization, and really clear user consent mechanisms are absolutely critical.
And amidst all this, there's a growing movement pushing to protect the human creator, right? To ensure human artistry isn't just swept aside or devalued. What specific solutions are being proposed?
Yeah, several key proposals come up. Things like ensuring fair remuneration for creators whose work is used in training data, some kind of licensing or payment system. Legislative reform of labor laws, especially to protect vulnerable freelance creatives who might be disproportionately affected. And the crucial introduction of human-made watermarking or other provenance tools, ways to reliably distinguish human-created content from AI-generated content to try and preserve the value placed on originality and human skill.
Okay, let's transition now to maybe the most profound, most long-term implications. How could all this reshape not just industries, but human psychology itself? Fragment our shared culture, challenge fundamental philosophical assumptions. This is the rupture of reality, philosophical and psychological frontiers. What actually happens to us when we can genuinely live inside these bespoke realities for extended periods?
Yeah, this gets deep. We need to think about the psychology of the inhabited narrative, as one source calls it, the effects of prolonged immersion in these highly realistic virtual worlds. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change, means it will adapt to virtual environments. This could lead to altered spatial awareness or visual processing back in the real world, potentially even impairing tasks like driving. There's also the Proteus effect. That's where individuals start adopting the behaviors and mannerisms of their virtual avatars, kind of blurring the lines between their digital and physical identities, and the emotional and social impacts. Well, it seems like a double-edged sword. There's definitely therapeutic potential using VR for stress reduction, pain management, even positive feelings from simulated nature. But there's also a risk of disassociation, maybe emotional blunting. Real life might start to seem pale or boring compared to these perfectly curated virtual heavens. That could foster social isolation. And remember that immersion divide we talked about. Higher levels of immersion, a stronger sense of presence, likely magnify both the positive and negative psychological effects.
What the sources reveal next is, well, it's a fascinating but also pretty unsettling trend. The potential erosion of the cultural monolith. The idea that this hyper-personalized, AI-generated media could actually fragment our shared cultural reality. Can you paint a picture of what that end state might look like?
Yeah, the logical endpoint described is a world where each individual's media consumption is almost entirely unique to them. Imagine no universally shared cultural touchstones like, say, Star Wars used to be, or globally recognized films or music. Instead, each person inhabits their own narrative, perfectly tailored by AI to their existing preferences and biases. How does this erosion happen? Well, two main mechanisms are mentioned. First, algorithmic homogenization. AI recommendation engines tend to amplify dominant, often Western, trends. This can create these massive global echo chambers while marginalizing local cultures and niche interests. Second, the erosion of cultural memory. When everyone's consuming pervasive global media, it can lead to the gradual fading of local languages, traditions, specific cultural values. Now, technology can be used for preservation, think indigenous language apps, but that requires conscious effort against the tide of commercial pressures pushing homogenization. This whole progression potentially leads to what one source calls a reality sandbox, the ultimate filter bubble, a bespoke world tailored perfectly to reinforce an individual's pre-existing beliefs. And that poses a really systemic risk to social cohesion. It dissolves the basis for a consensus reality, potentially undermining social trust, cooperation, even democratic governance if we can't agree on basic facts anymore.
So, bringing this all together, it feels like this isn't a simple utopia or dystopia narrative, is it? The term used is hypermodernism, a call for maybe cautious, but not necessarily pessimistic engagement. The central question seems to be, is AI ultimately helping humans achieve a better life, or is it somehow taking that opportunity away?
I think framing it as a philosophical rupture is quite accurate. It genuinely challenges some of our most foundational assumptions. Things like the clear line between human and machine, the idea of the uniqueness of human intelligence, our position as the sole authors of meaning in the universe. We might actually have to start sharing that stage, conceptually at least, with non-human entities possessing sophisticated capabilities.
And there's that powerful metaphor used in the sources, magical realism, how we now casually ask algorithms to generate photorealistic images or write poems. We treat things as mundane, everyday occurrences that would have seemed like pure magic just a decade ago.
Exactly. But that magic, the magic of AI, it isn't neutral, is it? It reflects our own hopes, our fears, our biases. So the crucial task for governance, for society, is to ground our policies in realism, to address the very real, immediate impacts on jobs, on truth, on human dignity. We need to ensure AI is steered towards genuinely improving our shared reality, not just offering ever more sophisticated ways to escape it.
So for you, the listener, navigating this complex future, the sources offer some pretty clear strategic recommendations for different groups. For creators, the advice is to embrace that centaur model, lean into your unique, authentic voice, the human element that AI can't replicate, and advocate collectively through guilds, unions, associations for fair pay when your work is used in training data, and for robust IP protection in this new landscape.
And for industry leaders, the message is invest in proprietary AI models, train them on clean, legally owned data. That offers a competitive edge and mitigates legal risks. Commit publicly to clear ethical frameworks, prioritize transparency, ensure human oversight is always in the loop, establish clear lines of accountability, and prepare for business model transformation. Recognize that value might shift away from just owning content towards providing platforms, tools, and curated experiences.
And finally, for policymakers, the call here seems urgent. Urgent legislative action is needed on copyright, authorship, liability. Those gray areas need clarity. Fund independent research into the long-term psychological and societal impacts of deep immersion in these synthetic worlds, and craft regulations that carefully balance fostering innovation with protecting social responsibility. That means mandating transparency, protecting the creative workforce, and actively working to strengthen the social fabric against these fragmenting forces. So we'll leave you with this final thought to chew on. In a future where we can prompt and inhabit virtually any reality we desire, how will we, collectively and individually, choose to define what is truly real? And perhaps more importantly, what will become of the shared human experiences, the shared culture, the shared truths that have historically bound us together? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. As always, keep exploring these crucial questions.